Welcome to the Newsmakers Podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and this is a show where we go behind the headlines every day to bring you an interview with a pastor, entertainer, politician, or other notable news figure. And this is a show, again, it's daily, but it's based on our weekly TV show, which is also called Newsmakers. You can watch it on the CBN News channel and also on our YouTube page. And on this show, every day, we dive deep. It's a little more longer form with one of the people who you will often see on our Newsmakers show or across the CBN News platforms. Pentecostal preacher Tony Suarez is on a mission to turn the conversation about the border and immigration back to the spiritual. He's hosting Revival on the Border, a two-part event, a massive event, in fact, planned in El Paso, Texas from March 21st through the 23rd and McAllen, Texas from March 27th through the 29th. These nights will be revival meetings and so much more. He says the only answer to solving the border crisis is Jesus, and he's going to join us today to take us through exactly what Revival on the Border stands for, what they'll be trying to do, and how prayer will be at the center of it all. Here is Tony Suarez. Revival on the Border. This, obviously, the border is a huge issue. Everybody's been talking about it. It's going to be a big election issue, but it's a people issue. It's a gospel issue. Talk about Revival on the Border. What are you trying to do?
Well, it's exactly that. See, I'm 43 years old. The last time we had immigration reform, Ronald Reagan was the president, and I was in kindergarten. But it's an issue that every election cycle is used for campaign fodder. It doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat, they'll use this issue. And then once they're in office, they do absolutely nothing with the issue. Now, I've spoken about immigration reform and about the issues along with Pastor Sam Rodriguez, who's my pastor in the NHCLC. We've been speaking to this issue for over 20 years. And every time it seemed like we were close, things would fall apart. And so what I'm contending for is that the answer to everything from border security to the human issue is Jesus Christ. And if Washington won't act, then the kingdom must act. And so that's why we're going to the border here in just a few weeks from the time of this taping.
So you're going to be in El Paso, you're going to be in McAllen, Texas, and you're going to the border. Mm-hmm. What's going to happen during these events?
So I'd love to tell you that there was like this prophetic foresight and like the Lord showed me and I saw this map and the Lord said here and here. But really, those are the two cities that opened up to come to a tent revival. It just so happens that when you look at the map, it is the most extreme border on the southern border, east and west. So, from right where Texas and New Mexico meet to right where Texas and Louisiana meet on the other side. So we'll start in El Paso. We're going to have 3 days of a tent revival there. And then we have what's called a prayer army. These are intercessors that are going to gather with us. We're going to pray over them and send them out from the tent in El Paso. They're going to drive the 1,254 miles of the southern border because part of what we felt the Lord called us to do was to pray over the entire southern border. So they're going to go and pray, and then we're going to stop El Paso, Presidio, Eagle Pass, Laredo, McAllen, Brownsville, the 6 key points of entry into the United States. And we're going to have prayer rallies in those specific cities. So 2 tent revivals, 6 prayer rallies. My goal, and I've learned to not put a cap on the Lord. So I'm going to say it this way. I'm believing for at least 5,000 people to have an experience with the Lord, whether they're water baptized, filled with the Spirit, give their life to God, healed, delivered, whatever it might be. And we're going to plant rocks. The Old Testament, they would plant these stones of memorial to remember a great victory or something they had done unto the Lord. We're going to plant these rocks in those 6 cities that say Revival on the Border as a memorial. We prayed here. And the second part of that was the book of Genesis chapter 2. The Lord essentially established an angelic border patrol around the Garden of Eden. He put cherubims at the corners and at the edges of the garden to protect the garden. Since they're the ministering spirits of the saints, I feel that we're to go pray and dispatch an angelic border patrol so that what's not happening legislatively, and by the way, it still has to happen, but until they get their act together, we're going to go to the one that can solve the problem. So we're going to eliminate donkeys and elephants and go right to the lion, the lamb, and the dove, and believe that this angelic army or angelic border patrol will serve as a protective covering for our border. But secondly, that they'll go into the desert and find those that have been deserted. My father was a church planter in Chicago, predominantly Hispanic church. We had more than one person that had crossed the border, talking the 70s, early 80s, and they were left to die in the desert. Women that were raped, children that were abused or tortured, and just left to die in the desert. But they testified that an angel of the Lord appeared, wings and all, and said, I'm been sent by God, and would bring them water, would bring them food, would bring them to a bus and say, go to Chicago, go to this. And they would go and they would come to our church and say, I'm just here because, and as that sounds so far out nowadays, but that's our heritage. The angels of the Lord, these ministering spirits, have done it for others. And so I'm praying that God would do it again for others that have been left to die in the desert. And now it's not just women, it's men as well. And I'm just believing that the hand of the Lord would help us. Our only motive is revival. I believe that revival is the answer, that great upswelling, that great move of God, not just in the church, but that revival that will start in the church house and then affect every house.
So obviously, this sounds like an incredible event. You have this issue of the border, lots of opinions about it, lots of political opinions. And as Christians, we sort of look at those opinions. People shouldn't be crossing illegally. What are we going to do? Now people are in different cities, and these cities are grappling with that. All of that aside, how are Christians, in light of the balance between justice and law and compassion and humanity and understanding what people are going through, how are we to process and understand and respond to this issue appropriately?
I think we always look at these issues through the lens of faith, whether it's immigration, abortion, any of the issues, the hotbed issues or hot take issues. We always come from a lens of compassion. Now, I'm a Hispanic, but before I'm Hispanic, I'm a Christian. I think they should shut the border down completely. And I have advocated for immigration reform. I have compassion for the issue. I've in the ministries that I've pastored, our congregations have been made up predominantly of undocumented immigrants. But right now the issue is it's like on steroids. That's the best adjective I can give. Yeah. For 15 years, I've been talking about approximately 15 million undocumented immigrants in the country. You're talking about like 30 million just in the last 4 years under this administration. It's out of control. This might not sound like the best analogy, but if my house was flooding, you can bring all the pails, all the buckets to get the water out. But until you find out where that water is entering the house, we're all working to no avail. So I want there to be compassionate, biblical, righteous immigration reform that respects the dignity of life, but also respects the rule of law. But we can't even get there until you shut that border down. Now, I don't know if that's for 4 days, 4 months. I don't think it's 4 years, but you got to get control of that issue. And I tell my Latino brothers, that's not the border issue of 10 years or 30 years ago, where this isn't just a Hispanic issue. There are legitimate terrorists crossing the border. I have spent considerable time at the border. I've ridden in boats down the Rio Grande with the Border Patrol. We were on the boat and the Mexican cartel is waving at us, calling our names out from their side of the beach. That's the kind of intel that they have. There is if Pastor Sam was here, and of course, he borrowed it from the Wizard of Oz, but he'd say, Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore. This issue is not what it used to be.
It's a national security issue. 100 is what you're saying.
100%. Right, and you have to shut that border down, the southern and the northern border. Shut them both down for a season. And because we don't just have a wall problem. That's the thing with this issue. It's just so big. Well, we can go on these rabbit trails. It's not just a wall problem. You need to have a wall, but the door is broken. The entry-exit system into the United States is broken. So when someone says, well, I think they just need to come the right way, I would ask, what is the right way? And they'd say, well, the right way. And well, what is that? We don't know it. And the reality is there isn't a right way. We still host what are called visa lotteries. But it's a lottery. People put money in to hope that, there's just so much and there's not enough time to cover it all. We have to fix the doorway into the system. We need to engage the marketplace. If the U.S. economy needs 500,000 workers, why would we cap it at 200,000 workers? And I'm just making up numbers. But there's a way that the market could dictate how many guest workers we allow into the country. Because I'll tell you this, whether we cap it at 200 and the market needs 600, one way or another, this market is always going to get the labor at once because Americans love cheap labor. So there has to be a better system. And in doing so, you eliminate the amount of illegal crossings that are happening in the nation. So I'm rambling, and I know it's probably more than what we need, but it's that kind of an issue.
It's an important issue.
Yeah.
And where can people go if they want to actually attend this event, if they want to come to the rallies? Where can they go to do that?
Yeah, so there's two websites, TonySuarez.com, or the name of our ministry is Revival Makers. And it's all one word, no parentheses, error, or whatever in there. Just revivalmakers.com or TonySuarez.com. All the information is there, and it's absolutely free. We just love to know that they're coming, so we make sure they have a seat for them.
Awesome. Appreciate your time. Thanks for
you,
joining
Billy.
us today.
Appreciate it.
That's all for today's Newsmakers podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the show, and also head over to the CBN News YouTube channel and the CBN News channel to watch Newsmakers every week. We'll see you soon.